Good day everyone, I am Rica Jhea Aponi from the first group and we are going to discuss about the pre-colonial literature.
Filipinos often lose sight of the fact that the first period of the Philippine literary history is the longest. Certain events from the nation's history had forced lowland Filipinos to begin counting the years of history from 1521. The first time written records by Westerners referred to the archipelago later to be called Las Islas Filipinas. However, the discovery of the Tabun Man in a cave in Palawan in 1962 has allowed us to stretch our prehistory as far as 50,000 years back. The stages of that prehistory show how the early Filipinos grew in control over their environment. Through the researches and writings about Philippine history, much can be reliably inferred about pre-colonial Philippine literature from an analysis of collective oral lore of Filipinos whose ancestors were able to preserve their indigenous culture by living beyond the reach of Spanish colonial administrators. So for the pre-colonial literature characteristics, first and foremost, it is based on oral tradition, crude and ideology and phraseology. It expresses the hopes and aspirations, the people's lifestyles as well as their loves. Explain how the world was created, how certain animals possess certain characteristics, why some places have waterfalls, volcanoes, mountains, flora, or fauna. From the analysis of collected oral lore of Filipinos who were able to preserve their indigenous culture by living beyond the reach of the Spanish colonial administrators' culture of 16th century Europe, these Filipinos, variously referred to as natives, ethnic minorities, tribal Filipinos, have been able to preserve for us epics, tales, songs, riddles, proverbs, and myths that are now our windows to a past with no written records we can study. They are not cultural artifacts like tools to ritual article. They are to be seen as cultural items useful in the reconstruction of a period of our literary history that has been obscured by the intrusion of a foreign culture, but which nevertheless exerted and continued to exert influence on the literary works of succeeding generation in terms of outlook, theme, and technique. And as literary works created in the setting of a society where the economic subsistence, land, water, and forest were communally owned, the oral literature of the pre-colonial Filipinos bore the marks of the community. The subject matter was invariably the common experience of the people, constituting a village, food gathering, creatures and objects of nature work in the home field, forest, or sea, caring for children, and etc. The language of oral literature, unless the piece was the part of the community like the epic, was the language of the daily life.
So what is oral literature? It refers to any form of verbal art which is transmitted orally or delivered by word of mouth. It is shown whether spoken, recited, or sung. Here are the examples of oral literature. First is a riddles or a bugtong. It is a question, a puzzle, a phrase, or a statement devised to get an expected or clever answer. It is also known as a battle of wits among participants. When someone uses it as a puzzle or a question, it could be a thought-provoking challenge to make the audience think, or it could be a funny comment intended to make the audience laugh. Here are the examples of bugtong. First It is so fragile that if you say its name, you break it. What is it? The answer is, it is silence. Another example is, I have a head, I have a tail, but I do not have a body. I am neither a lizard nor a snake, then guess who I am? Answer is, I am a coin. So these riddles help the individuals. Riddle or bugtong makes the people or participants to think of an answer to that certain phrase or puzzle. It made the people guess and thought of a lot of things before answering. Because when we say bugtong or riddle, it will really make you think of something out of the box. Just to have an answer to the certain phrase, it is really a mind game. Another example of oral literature is a proverb. So, it is a short saying or a piece of folk wisdom. When we say folk wisdom, it is a belief and opinion of ordinary people. Proverb is also known as a wise saying. So what is a wise saying? It is a saying that is based on experience, knowledge, and good judgment. I have here two examples of a proverb. First is, never stop learning because life never stops teaching. Second, there is no shame in not knowing. The shame lies in not finding out. These sayings teach us about life. It motivates us in our everyday life. It gives us learning that somehow we forgot sometimes. It is also our guide in a battle we are facing or a struggle we are conquering. These sayings inspires us to become better individuals. Another example of the oral literature is Atanaga. It is an indigenous type of Filipino poem. The poetic art uses 4 lines. Each line is having 7 syllables only. Tanaga expresses insights and lesson in life. I have here 2 examples of Tanaga. First is an English Tanaga. So, you're a blessing in disguise, tart and sour, yet sweet surprise, hidden in the attitude, tongues with words of gratitude. So, those 7 syllables and 4 lines are an example of a Patanaga. So, another example that is a Filipino is kalaro nate ulan sa hardin kong nagisnan pumitas at natikmang mayroong tamis ang santan.
Folk songs. It is a form of folk lyric which expresses the hopes and aspirations of people's lifestyles as well as to their loved one. Folk song means that it is a song that composed of the everyday lifestyle of the Filipino during pre-colonial period. It emphasized their hopes as an individual and it expressed their feelings to their loved ones, to their everyday life, and to the country.
We have here 3 examples of folk songs. First, Ili Ili Tulog Anay. It is from Ilonggo tribe, Visayas, which means lullaby song. Second, Bahay Kubo. It is from Tagalog tribe from Luzon, which means working song. Third, Magtanim Ay Di Biro. Originated from Tagalog tribe from Luzon, which means working song.
So, another literary form is we have folk tales. So, folk tales are stories that is part of the oral tradition or passed on by word of mouth from one generation to the next. Folk tales are usually set in the distant past. They are told in every country around the world. Examples of folk tales are myth, legends, fables, and fantastic stories. So we have here a picture of the girl who turned into a fish and why the piña has 100 eyes. So that is an example of folk tales. So part of folk tales is we have myth, a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or events. So we have here a picture of gods and goddesses in Greek mythology. Another part of folk tales is we have legend, a traditional story sometimes popularly regarded as historical but unauthenticated. So here we have a picture of the King Arthur. So that is an example of legend. Next we have fable, a short story typically with animals as characters, conveying a moral lesson. So here we have a picture of the mouse and the lion. And lastly, we have fantastic stories. So it is a subgenre of literary works characterized by the ambiguous presentation of seemingly supernatural forces. So an example of fantastic story is we have The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So to wrap up everything, folk tales are stories that grow out of the lives and imagination of the people. They have always been children's favorite type of folk literature.
Then lastly, we have epics. Okay, so when we talk about epics, it is a long poem, typically one derived from ancient oral traditions and or ancient Greek adjectives epikos, which means a poetic story, which narrating the deeds and adventures of heroic or legendary figures or the history of a nation. So, here are the examples of ethno-epics popularized by different ethnic groups in the country. So, first entry we have Lamang. Biag ni Lamang or Life of Lamang of the Ilocanos narrates the adventures of the prodigious epic hero Lamang, who exhibits extraordinary powers at an early age. At 9 months, he is able to go to war to look for his father's killers. Then while in search of Lady Love in his canoyan, he is swallowed by a big fish. But his roster and his friends bring him back to life. So second entry, we have Aligoyon or the Hudhud of the Ipugaos tells of the adventures of Aligoyon as he battles his arch enemy Pampukhayon among rice fields and terraces and instructs his people to be steadfast and learn the wisdom of warfare and of peacemaking during harvest seasons. Then third entry, we have Sandayo. Sandayo of the Sobanon tells of the story of the hero with the same name who is born through extraordinary circumstances as he fell out of the hair of his mother while she was combing it on the next stroke. Hence, he leads his people in the fight against invaders of their land and waterways. Then the Tagalog's pride of their myth of Bernardo Carpio, a folk hero said to hold the mountains of San Mateo apart with his powerful arms to prevent them from colliding.
That's all. Thank you.